Hey, folks. Still here at ng-conf. I am talking to
Hello, Eudes.
Eudes.
Close. Good. That worked.
I said Eudes like the guys in Doctor Who.
Sorry. I'm actually a pretty big geek, but Doctor Who is not part of my references. I
Okay.
think Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings. Stuff,
Okay.
and less classical stuff. But D&D,
You're
if you
missing
want.
out. You know.
I know. Just you have to convince my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Aliens that fly around in blue police boxes. There's just something to be said for it.
Oh, I agree. Actually, I'm a big fan of Supernatural, which is a very ironic show, but that Supernatural, I was able to convince my wife to watch it together. Doctor Who is just that's the limit for her.
Yeah, my wife won't watch it with me either, but I think I can get my 12-year-old into it at this point.
So I just have to wait 8 more years and
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I'll do this.
Some of the episodes were a little bit scary, so but I think for a 12-year-old he'd be fine. So anyway, but we're not here to talk about that. Although it is interesting color commentary, and we'll leave it into the interview. But anyway, so we're here at ng-conf. You're speaking at ng-conf. When are you speaking?
On Thursday late afternoon, 5
Okay.
p.m. I believe. I have to double check.
That sounds right. I did look, but I don't remember because I looked at everybody for today. But yeah, so you can go check ng-conf.org, I think it is. You can go look at the schedule for Thursday and find out when Eudes is speaking.
Yes.
And your talk is which one?
So it's a deep dive on content projection. So it's extremely technical, but because of that, I'm going to make it very fun, or as fun as I can. Has pretty much a joke every slide. Lots of things like that. So yeah, I was pretty much at the risk of being too technical, so I did everything I could for it not to bore people off during the talk.
So what is content projection?
So pretty much if you're writing a reusable component, whether it's for a library or just your own application and you know you're going to reuse this several times, then you don't want just encapsulated components that receives the inputs only, because that won't work for, say, buttons. Buttons have text inside of them and icons and everything, so you want to put the text here to project the text. And that's just ng content. Most people know this when they come to ng-conf. So I'll just go quickly over the basics of ng content, and then I'll dive into the stuff people ask sometimes, but most of the time don't ask, and then when they learn how it works. So that's pretty much my goal here, is to make a talk about questions you didn't know you had about ng content. Answer lifecycle questions and ng-if stuff and all that, all the edge cases that people have been banging their heads against. And so that's pretty much the talk.
Very cool. And this is all stuff you use on Clarity at VMware?
Yes, that's stuff we do every day with Clarity. That's actually stuff that the reason I wrote this presentation is because I know almost all libraries have struggled with this at one point or another. There were heated debates on GitHub, on the Angular GitHub, between the material team and the Clarity team and the ng prime team, and no one wanted to do the same thing. No one wanted Angular to do the same thing. And so this talk is pretty much explaining the conclusion of the debates and what's supposed to happen.
Gotcha. That sounds terrific. Now, one of the things that I'm hoping to do with some of these interviews is help people get to know the speakers. So talk about yourself for a minute. What do you do? What do you like to do? It sounds like you've got at least one child.
Two toddlers. So, and I work from home.
Oh, nice. Not a moment's peace. I know how it goes.
No, they go to daycare right now, so I'm safe-ish. Just can't wait for the older one. She's going to get into school pretty soon. That means she finishes, at 2 p.m., something like this. It's going to be fun. So, yeah, I have 2 kids. I'm in New York, but I work remote.
Okay.
The Clarity team is all remote, but the company is based in Palo Alto, so we just travel there every quarter to meet everyone. And so I've been working on Clarity for 3 years It's been open source for about 2 years. Before that, I worked for a year at VMware. No, so yeah, maybe I'm off with my years, rounding up. As I said, I'm actually a bigger geek than you would think, even though I don't know Doctor Who. I do spend my time playing games, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or video games or board games or absolutely anything you can think of. And I watch too much Netflix. But that's because I have an excuse. Before joining VMware and working on Clarity, I worked for a little startup in France that used to do, still does, recommendations, algorithm for recommendations for movies and TV shows. So I actually had to know my stuff before I designed the algorithms and implemented them to test them. So I had to watch a lot of movies and TV shows just to make sure I was doing things right.
I can support that lifestyle.
Yeah, that was a pretty good gig at that point.
Yeah. Honey, what are you watching? It's for work, dear. Are you watching it? It's for work. It's work.
Yeah, the problem is you don't always watch the good stuff only. That's the problem they had a lot of the times. If you go, deep into the Netflix catalog, it starts getting awful. So sometimes it's work, but I honestly, I was mostly designing the algorithms and implementing them. That startup was 2 engineers for 10 content experts, and those content experts were the ones actually watching movies all day. Wasn't that fun for them because they would watch 1 hour and a half movies in half an hour.
Right.
Fast forwarding through them to be able to index them correctly. But yeah, it was just pretty much an excuse to watch Netflix for me.
Nice. Now I'm going to take just a minute and thank our sponsor, Kendo UI. They're sponsoring the interviews for the conference. And yeah, if you need visual components, that's their thing. That's what they do. So, graphs. I really love their data table widget thing that they have. I guess it's a component, not a widget thing. But anyway, it's pretty great. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, go check out Kendo UI.
Or Clarity.
Or Clarity. Yeah.
Not sure if I can say that if they're your sponsor, but yeah. Actually, so maybe your sponsor won't like it. VMware was using Kendo for a while. And when we started Clarity, one of the points was for us to have a data grid and components that were on par with Kendo to be able to replace it internally. So hopefully, try Kendo, try Clarity, try Material. I'm advertising everyone right now, and ng-prime. There are different styles, different things you might like. Generally speaking, you have Kendo and ng-prime on one side, which are very big configuration objects oriented, kind of jQuery style components. You give a JSON that contains all the options and you're done. Whereas if you go Material or Clarity, what we'll do is much more granular and you compose smaller pieces together. Hopefully, if you have a typical use case, that means you don't have to specify many options, which is simpler. If you have a very complex use case, then yes, you're going to have to specify more. What we're trying to do is make sure it's always fully customizable and you can always get what you want. But yeah, it's
it sounds like kind of the convention over configuration kind of thing, right? Maybe
a little bit. It's so both will be very configurable. One's more of a here is what I want, do it for me. That will be the Kendo and ng-prime way. And the other is, I know what I want. I just need you to give me smaller tools so I can build it.
Okay.
And I want full control at all times.
Right.
So we chose that position because we believe engineers actually hate the do it for me.
It depends.
It depends. All right. Yeah, I know. If you do graphs in Canvas, you just want some library to do the graphs for you, the charts and all that. But if you... For stuff like data tables, we looked at both, and yeah, it's a lot of people actually want control over the data table. They want to handle, they pretty much want hooks on everything, and at that point, you just want to give them smaller pieces for them to build the table together. It's
but Fair enough.
Not saying one's better than the other, saying we offer both options,
Yep.
and we picked one, Kendo picked another one,
Yep.
ng-prime 2. Just
Cool. So what is it like to work on a visual library like Clarity?
I love it. So this is my first time working in open source and my first time working on the library. So it's a bit of everything at the same time. I've always said I loved working on reusable pieces for developers. I once said at an job interview, that my dream job would have been to write the collections library in Java, like the good old super basic collection stuff, because the typing's really fun to play with. I like all that. So yes, the trying to think of everything people might want to do and put it together in a way that they can customize it, but at the same time not be too verbose. It's a balancing act, and it's really tremendous. At the same time, it also means I'm very unfamiliar with basic Angular stuff like routing, because you don't want your library to handle routing for you.
Right.
So if you actually were to ask me questions about routing, I'll be beginner level. I can check it out on the website and put it together pretty quickly, but I don't use it every day. Same thing for HTTP requests and all that. So on one side, it feels like it's a more focused work than doing the entire app. You do give up some control because you don't know how your things are going to be used. But you can just focus on what I think is the interesting part, the little optimizations, the architecture of your components that work in any possible way that people will put it together. It's very, very interesting work. We are putting together a guide for a pretty lengthy guide for contributing to Clarity. The goal is, to help us out when people contribute. We've had issues with people just submitting PRs, and working on the library is very, very different from working on an application. But we're hoping this guide can actually help other libraries too, and other people trying to build components and reusable components. Trying to avoid the pitfalls, trying to avoid some APIs will just require you to maintain them forever, adding features after features. And we're trying to help people not have to do that, to help people give the customizable way immediately, and then, publish libraries way more easily. And at that point, the entire Angular community wins, right? If anyone can publish components without worrying about maintaining them 5 hours a day for the rest of the night.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's the biggest challenge working on a visual system like Clarity?
Designers? Don't tell them I say that. I hope they don't listen to this podcast. No, I love the designers on the team.
I was going to say that was a really cheap shot.
No, they're really great. To be fair, designer-engineer communication is often a pretty hard part of working in a design system and UI library. We're lucky we have great designers. Several of them have engineering backgrounds and have great ways to communicate with us, so we really don't have a problem here. I was just more talking in a more general way. I guess the hardest parts are always the open source parts. The people taking it for granted and then asking for 5 features that would require them, one line to code on their side, 1 line to code on our side, except when you get, 100 of these, we don't have time to do it.
Right.
And it's the usual open source problems.
No, I've never heard anyone talk about. I can't even say it with a straight face. Seriously, any reasonably complex or reasonably popular project I've seen in open source, they have this problem, right? And people they rely on it, they count on it. People don't think about what's involved in it, and then, oh well, it doesn't do this right, or it doesn't do it the way I want, or I need this other feature. Yeah.
So
pretty common.
So typical problems we face every day are accessibility. It's a very big deal for us.
I'll bet.
It's so we maintain very, very high standards for it, and such. Sometimes we have designs that went through everything, were approved, and we're going for them, and we realize halfway through the design itself is not accessible, and we have a problem.
Right.
So that's a big deal. And then other than this, I guess the problem we're facing, Clarity specifically, is we grew up very fast. Some of our components haven't been maintained or touched in a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
They're stable, right? People use them,
right,
they're
right,
fine.
right.
It's just they're not up to our native standards, or they still work in Angular, but they're still using deprecated APIs or things like that.
Right.
So trying to both keep some velocity when releasing components and clean up the project, which really started in a startup kind of way, is really what we're facing today as a major hurdle.
That makes sense. Sounds like you could use some help, and you did mention that you're working on the contribution document. So if people want to contribute, what do they do?
So what we're putting in place is a proposal template, meaning no matter what you want to do, even if it's a simple fix, you'll post on GitHub a template, just like an issue template, that you'll copy, paste, and fill out. And it'll explain what you want to do, why you think it should go in Clarity, what's the use case, and points that I haven't seen so far in other open source projects when doing this, and we're really betting on these. It's any API for that change, meaning a new input on a component or renaming of a null input or something like this. You spell them out explicitly, any public classes that you're going to export, you specify them before coding anything. You specify the API and you show code snippets of what it will look like when you use it. Not as in UI look like, as in I'm a developer and I'm integrating this, what do I write? So you write those code snippets before you code the actual component or feature or whatever it is. And finally, we require a little bit of architecture descriptions. Again, simple fixes will be, I'll just fix that part of that file, right? But larger ones will ask you for what classes are you going to write? What services? How do they inject each other? How do they communicate between one another? And having this, it sounds daunting, but the template is really here to guide you step by step. We're hoping it will just make you think through what you're trying to contribute before submitting a PR. And at that point, if you see an issue, if you realize, oh, I'm going to hit a problem here, it's going to create a bug and I can't do it, then you see it before spending, 5 hours coding the feature and submitting the PR. So that will be the first step. And then at that point, we're also trying to use techniques from older open source projects. The UI, web UI open source is the Wild West right now. And we're trying to get, like, VMware does a lot of open source for system stuff, like Linux and stuff like that. And they have a very different policy than web UI. So we're trying to, take a page from their book on some things. So we're going to, even for external contributions, create topic branches and ask for smaller PRs, a couple hundred lines at most that we can review easily, merge in that topic branch, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be a much more granular contribution process. And we're hoping we can help people with that. Because, we've had PRs, and I know Angular has the same problem, and Material has the same problem. There are PRs that come in at 1,500 lines of code, and there is no way you can proofread that completely. Sure, you can trust the unit tests, but it's not enough generally. So we're really trying to break this, to have smaller contributions, ahead of time thinking with a proposal template. And hopefully with all that, we'll have a much higher conversion ratio on our pull requests.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can also see where, from the contributor standpoint, then you go through the process of putting together a proposal. It makes it a whole lot easier to get what I want into Clarity.
Exactly. Because if you contribute otherwise, if you could contribute directly as a PR, we might ask you to change your inputs. We might tell you this is, and you end up with something that is not exactly what you wanted in the beginning. Whereas if we negotiate first what you want to do, you might get your use case and another general use case that we want at the same time. And that might be the negotiation.
Or you may contribute something that's completely workable. It would be a good thing for Clarity, but it just doesn't fit the project quite right.
Yes.
And so if you go through the process of making the communication happen up front, then everybody wins.
Exactly. No one loses time on that.
Yep.
And we're really going to try and help our contributors step by step as much as we can, see how that goes. It's the opposite of what we've done so far. So there's going to be a huge guideline for each step. But hopefully that works. And we'll take the whole painful part of rebasing and squashing and all that for you, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of going through the same thing with the podcasts. I'm starting to have people come to me and say, I want to start a show, or I want to add, this aspect to one of your shows. And it's the same kind of thing, right? It's here's how we operate. Here's, so if you're going to be part of what we're doing, then you have to do it the way we do it. And yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So, is there anything in particular you're working on these days?
So, as I said, these days I'm mostly working on maintenance, cleanup, stuff like that. I do want to.
Maintenance is the best.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Actually, I do like some refactors. I got this. I work like that. I like the clean up everything, and I have a few in mind. I'm working mostly on the smaller ones right now. I'm actually spending more time on outreach, ng-conf, or even internally at VMware, small talks and presentations to help out. The one thing I'm actually I think I'm going to do after is write proper testing utilities for Clarity and see how that goes. I already wrote a blog post about cool ways to do testing in Angular. I'm thinking of extracting it and doing more in those utilities, so that not only will it be easier for Clarity team members and contributors to write unit tests,
right?
Hopefully get all the overhead out and just one line, one unit test. But even maybe, contribute it, like put it out there, open source, or just describe what we do in the blog posts, whatever it is, to help out. Because, and as much as the documentation is there, unit testing in Angular can be pretty painful.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned a blog post. Do you have a blog?
Yeah, so on Medium. It's on Medium. We have a Clarity, I don't even know how you call that on Medium, a group or something, publication, I think that's the term. And the different team members publish stuff.
Right.
So you'll get designers, like the most recent one is Lilia on our team designed the entire dark theme for Clarity. And she explains what challenges she went through, what she didn't expect to have to do for a dark theme, all those things. We also had Aditya recently post a blog about how we implemented the date picker, because that took us twice as long as we expected, maybe 3 times as much. And everything we went through with accessibility and internationalization and scrolling issues, because initially the design scrolled and things like that. So it doesn't go that much into detail, but it gives you a window of what we're facing, how we're solving it, and it might give you ideas on what to try on your side. So yeah, we have several publications like this. We try and have, every couple of weeks or so, maybe a bit more.
Sounds good. So the last question is, we talked about blog, but, Twitter, GitHub, if people want to see what you're contributing or thinking or whatever, where does that happen?
So I do have a Twitter. I guess, my handle is in the presentation, so watch my presentation to have it.
Ooh, folks.
And otherwise, we try and have a lot of our conversations in public on GitHub. So if you just go to the Clarity GitHub, you'll see us discussing designs, discussing new components out there. Admittedly, Clarity is an internal VMware team, so we do talk a lot on the private Slack, so you won't have everything, but we do try and update GitHub as much as possible. And whenever, for instance, designers end up with a final design for something and pass it to engineering, they do it through GitHub, so that we can comment on GitHub and explain maybe if we're going to have technical issues or stuff like that. So we try and keep it public. And we're also trying to push Stack Overflow for Clarity, because we don't have a good way for people to ask questions. And we're now up to 100 questions on Stack Overflow. So it's growing progressively. So if you have any questions for us and you don't know how to reach us, Stack Overflow is the best place.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming. Again, it's going to be Thursday afternoon around
5 p.m.
I think. And go verify that on the website. But it sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I promise the talk is funny. So far, I had pretty good success during the rehearsals. I even got people taking pictures of the talk.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, yeah, we'll look forward to it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.